Hello everybody. Welcome to our fourth Coaching Network talk. I'm really excited about tonight's call because this is with one of my favorite authors on the subject of giftedness, which he calls XI. This is Willem Kuipers, and I discovered his work when I discovered his book, Enjoying the Gift of Being Uncommon. When I discovered that book, I was really, really happy because I struggled to find the kind of literature that spoke to me in a holistic way about giftedness. So when I found his work, I immediately contacted him and said, "Can I talk to you?" And his answer was yes. And that first discussion has led to a series of very interesting discussions and a really interesting and rich collaboration with Willem in InterGifted. So in InterGifted now, Willem is a collaborator, contributor, and member, and is part of our coaching network. And we're very excited to have him in there, and in the rest of the group. His background is really interesting, and he'll probably tell you a little bit about it. He started in math, and then became a management consultant, and then, like most of us, kind of found his way over to the gifted world through a series of personal experiences and learnings. And in recent years, not so recent, but the most recent years, he's been working in collaboration with his wife, providing career coaching and self-development coaching for gifted people, predominantly highly gifted people. So very, very interesting work. You're going to find his talk very interesting tonight about gifted relations or gifted results. Which do you prefer? And I wanted to read just one little thing from Willem's description of his own work, because this for me summarizes very much what you'll see in his approach and what I appreciate so much. So he says, "I like to support my clients in striking a sustainable and flexible balance between thinking and feeling, logic and intuition, conceiving and acting, between adapting and remaining autonomous." This for me is a great summary of your work and explains a lot about what you'll talk about tonight. So welcome, Willem. Thank you so much for doing this for us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is my cue.
This is your cue.
Yes. Okay, well, welcome to my presentation. Thanks to InterGifted. This is the first time I have an online presentation, and thank you all in advance for allowing me to practice on you how to do this. Let me first introduce how my commitment to the subject of giftedness. In a way, Jen said already some things about it, but I'll introduce that and I'll show you the overview of this talk. And from time to time, I'll ask you whether there are questions. And when you see my eye wandering to the left, I'm consulting my notes. So I'm not NLP addressing my left thing. 60 years ago, our daughter, then 7 years old, was declared gifted by a psychologist, a child psychologist, who said, "Well, just as you expected, yes, definitely, she is gifted." Well, we didn't expect that at all, and we were seriously wondering, why do we have a gifted child? And what do you do about it? Something like, you wish your child the best of all things, but probably not that. The trail led back to us, and I started to read about it. My wife, Annelien, started to read about it and said, we have to find out ourselves, and we enrolled for the Mensa test. Mensa in Holland has these kind of tests, and Annelien went, basically she thought that Georgina had it all from me, as unfortunately many women do. I'll come to that later. But she went with me, and she got her Mensa degree, you might say, in the first round, and I miserably failed quite considerably. But I already had noticed that many of my clients, some of my clients, I suddenly realized it must be a gifted person. And so I entered the subject, which I'd never done before, and it was all real right on the mark. So I phoned a psychologist of Mensa and said, how come that I don't get to the level of the 98th percentile? And I have these clients, please explain to me. So he said, okay, you were scoring, okay, come to my office and we'll have a separate new test and we'll see what happens. Because sometimes these tests don't go well because of stress. And if you come to my house, that will be different. So I came, I should say that Annelien also mentioned, the end result was, I was obviously very gifted in these results. And fortunately, my wife said after the first time when I failed, she said, that proves that IQ testing is not a valid way to find out. And so I was practiced, knowledgeable about this subject. So at the age of 47, I knew I was gifted. So what? I had a label, but nothing else. What did I know? I had, as Cyril generally said, I had been a mathematical engineer, management consultant, career consultant, and I got these typical clients, and I thought it's not practical to use the word giftedness. In Dutch, it's translated highly giftedness, and when you're high, other people are low, and many people don't like that. So I tried to find a different word which has less emotional load, and came up to a kind of factual description and said, let's call it extra intelligence. And second way is, let's find a way, find tools to recognize, not through testing, but through characteristics, whether you are XI, extra intelligent. So I've been developing in these past 15 years specific tools, finding more out about the subject, debunking many false beliefs and loads that people carry about what giftedness is, sharing through my website, working international, writing. And why do I tell all these things? Because I think it's important to make clear that the subject is for almost everyone a journey of self-discovery. And my motto is coming home to yourself, enjoying what you discover. And I would like to invite you to do this to yourself as well, though of course you have been doing that, otherwise you would not be attending here. So I'll continue with my presentation. I have some sheets I will show you from time to time through sharing media, and these texts will come out in a handout connected to the presentation on the website after some days after the site. So you can make notes, but the text will be available at some time after my presentation. So let's start with, this is, as far as I'm concerned, these are the themes of my talk. I'll delve firstly more in this complementary perspective of giftedness. Then we enter the subject of empathy and task orientation, the relevance of the subject for the gifted or extra intelligent. We go to the interpersonal reactivity index that you've been scoring, hopefully. There's another intermission then for questions. And then we go to access empathy and access task orientation, and possibly the patterns in from childhood that lead or are inviting to get into this access mode of your natural empathy and task orientation, how it works within personal relations, and I end with the question, where do we go from here? Stop share. Here I am again. I think giftedness is connected for many people to objective results, professionals that qualify as experts and say you are a gifted person, scientific aptitude. Gifted people are obviously very scientific. They love science. They have great expectations. Society has great expectations of them, great obligations you get freely too. Society needs you, society needs the gifted, but somehow it also means that this outside world is looking at you and asking and expecting, watching you, judging you. Do we already see a new Einstein, a new Marie Curie? My heart lies not with looking from outside in, but from looking from inside out. How is it like to be you, and do you know what it's like to be you? So, boing. Does it work? Oh, there it is. Because you might consider it kind of existential question, but I do think there is the question to be or not to be gifted, and you have to work hard to make that decision for yourself, because many people like to hide it and prefer not to be gifted and say, okay, if I just tell no one and don't show it too much, probably I will escape this watching, judging, expectations. But actually, I think denying the gift is a way to deny yourself. And at some point in your life, you find out, and that's not always a nice experience, but it is an experience of growing. And unlike some people are thinking, giftedness is not something which is just like an add-on in your system which leads to excellent results, but it's ingrained in all your body cells, in your mind, in your spirit. And as long as you don't acknowledge that and come to terms and discover what there is to discover, in a way you are denying yourself, which is obviously a pity. So the main question is, what's your connection to this typical and seemingly uncommon characteristics that giftedness entails? And ask yourself the question, how does it feel to be me? Ask yourself the question of people that are dear to you, around you. How is it to be them? So what I try to support and encourage with my work is that people acknowledge and explore who they are and find out why they do the things that they obviously always do, cannot stop from doing, and express this extra quality, this extra intelligence and intensity that's in their system. So, as when you have looked into these pages of my website, you find this complementary perspective on giftedness that I've been, in a way, developing, defining. I think it's complementary because as the regular perspective of giftedness is outside in, this is inside out, and both are needed. So I think extra intelligence indicates a subjectively verified by yourself, uncommonly high level of one or more kinds of intelligence, and more kinds, that is the Gardner the way of approaching things. So 8 or more kind of intelligences. And I invite people to recognize XIPs, extra intelligent persons. People, they recognize themselves essentially in 3 or more of the following 5 traits: intellectual able, incurably inquisitive, in need of autonomy and fighting when it gets threatened, or fleeing or freezing, excessiveness, intensity might also call it, and some people also contrast between emotional and intellectual self-confidence. So the nerds are sure in their brain and unstable in their belly, and often imaginal thinkers are the other way around. They are fairly able to do what they want to do, but not when they're asked, are you sure about this? Did you read something about it? Has it been verified, what you're telling? Then somehow they become a small puddle on the floor. So in following Gardner, I think the important question is not whether you are extra intelligent, but how you are extra intelligent. And the main reason for that is that there are so very many ways to be uncommonly intelligent. And the traditional approach of IQ score is one-dimensional, and it leads to thinking that there are these people here, that there are kind of weird people who are happily together being very smart, and they somehow are obviously similar. Well, if you consider intelligence to be more than one dimension, and just imagine 2 dimensions and make a natural distribution, you realize that these people here beyond the 2% line are as different from each other as you might possibly conceive, and that of course the possibility is that they are not in this figure, but they are somewhere here or somewhere here when they are highly or profoundly intelligent, and they have a vast empty space around them. Well, lots of space is of course very nice, but there are few people they can easily resonate with because they are so very much different. And this is the picture that drives me to wonder about how you are uncommonly intelligent and intense. Having come this far, does anyone want to comment or ask at this moment on what I have said before we continue to the empathy and task orientation? So you can look in the way you look downside on the bottom of your screen somewhere to the left. Okay. I feel free to continue then. What is empathy? I think in a way, well, I'm obviously from the empathetic kind, but somehow I always have thought for some time that everyone was empathic, and at some point you start, and that's we have now one element, but there are all these other elements too. At some point you start to wonder, does not everybody have that? And what do they have if they don't have that? Is not everybody aware of other people's minds? And well, if you're not empathic, what do you have that empathic people do not have? Or are you just missing something? So that led to my idea that there was something called, I coined it myself, I've looked for many words, task orientation. And there is a kind of polarity which you can think about and say, okay, there is a quality of task orientation. The extra point I'll come later. And there's empathy, and it's polarity, and you can see the main difference is that task-oriented people prefer result to the relation. They prefer achieving something to the people they achieve it with, while empathic people prefer basically they are more aware of with who they are doing things, and they are more investing in the relation, and the result comes as a side effect to them. When I explain, of course, the polarity, people are somehow in the middle or more to the left or more to the right. They're all varieties available, but I just explained polarity to make it more clear-cut. Second point is attention to focus rather than context for the task-oriented people, and so the empathy people have more with context. Often task-oriented people favor structure, and they hate political games, either at work or in private, while empathic people favor cooperation, and they hate that when other people neglect them or neglect other people. Task-oriented people have a low ability to pick up non-verbal signals. They like expressed words. If you have a bad mood, say it. They don't easily pick up someone's non-verbal signs like, could you please stop talking now? If you don't tell them, they will just go on. Well, in this setting up, I probably will too. But the empathetic people, they have, funnily, a low ability to not tune into others. Tuning into others is their natural situation, and if they're not aware of it, it's very hard for them not to tune in. An important thing, because that word task orientation is sometimes confusing. It's not like being driven to do anything, because you can also be driven for having a good relation. All XIPs are driven, but the task-oriented XIPs are driven for a result, and the empathy XIPs are driven for relation. Let's get away of it because I want to show you something. In a way, I think empathy works like a kind of sonar for many people. Empathic people, in a way, they ping others. When they enter a situation, they immediately say, ping, here I am, where are you? Do you see me? And when they meet other empathetic people, they receive immediately backwards, ping, I see you, and I'm here. The funny thing is that when they meet task-oriented people, they are not aware of the ping, so they don't respond. And at first, and even quite often, certainly when you're not aware of it, you, as an empath, you tend to tune up to say not ping, but ping, hoping to get some results. But, well, it's technically like a black hole. You can ping whatever, but nothing comes back, but it exhausts you. So that's a typical but fundamental confusion and inequality between the two varieties. I think I should, you can also, in a way, I said it in words through this context against focus, but you might say, and I can show it with my hands, that a task-oriented person views the world something like this. Oh, I have to do it in how it works. So it's a bit narrow, while an empath is no, I cannot show it. It's more unfocused, so it's more like this, and the task-oriented person is more like this. See, I see my own picture somewhere left of the camera, so when I look to the mirror image, I get all wrong. But like this and more like this. I'll come later to the access point, but obviously a task-oriented person who gets stressed gets more narrow in his focus, while empath tends to get wider in his awareness of context until all result and own focus disappears. We'll come later to that when we have a talk about access. I think it's important to state and restate that there is no, in my opinion, there is no good or bad or better or worse between task orientation and empathy. It's a different point of relating, a different way of relating. And I think they're complementary, and actually, as in real life, you often find they pair, as you might call it. Let me see. Okay, yes, I'll need to show the sheet again, because there's this funny image here, which I have called identity. The nice thing, of course, when you start calling things extra, you can find all words, coin new words that start with an X, and I've taken that liberty. There's identity, there is Zionisty, there's extra receptivity, extra whatever. You'll when you read my website or book, you'll find all signs. I just want to show the identity as a way I define identity as 9 characteristic facets of extra intelligence that mutually influence each other. So all these facets can, for any person, be relevant at some time to find out more about how they are extra intelligent. We are focusing on this particular one, empathy and task orientation. And the center facet, its degree of C, you might consider it kind of amplificator, but also when the amplification is strong, like in highly or profoundly gifted, it leads to a qualitative different personality, to my opinion. But as extra intelligence is generally an amplificator, that's why, and I think that's important to consider, that of course all people have a preference for either task orientation or empathy, but characteristic for XIPs is that they are always extra on this quality. So, well, there are of course many people who focus on doing results, but the XIPs get their reproaches. You are always so driven. Why do you focus so hard? Or the empath gets these comments like, you're always so sensitive. So it's important to be aware that, of course, in identity, there are all kinds of qualities that everyone has, but it makes it relevant to find out about them for yourself, because due to your extra intelligence and intensity, you tend to amplify the characteristic, which can make it problematic, which other people notice. Yes. So, well, I already mentioned that. And now when you consider, I come to the, well, Jen asked me, of course, when I started to think of this presentation, she asked for a title, and she said, well, we like to have the word gifted in the title because, you know, we are called InterGifted. So that's okay with me. And I came up, say, okay, gifted results or gifted relations, which I came up at the moment and immediately realized that gifted relations, what are gifted relations? Because the funny thing of the word giftedness is that you would never or easily associate it with relations. You connect it with results, excellent results actually. IQ test, high level, excellent results. Measurable performance, prizes. The funny thing is when giftedness is so much connected to results, how task-oriented are what I would call the guardians of the label gifted. So are the people who have been defining the word gifted and have been thinking of all these definitions and thinking of all the programs, are they relatively more task-oriented than empathic? And is that one of the reasons why, in my opinion, many empathic ex-IPs have struggled at some point in their life with acknowledging, recognizing at all their giftedness, because it didn't came out as everyone told them that it should come out. But so the challenge is how to define gifted relations. Linda Silverman, who has written extensively about giftedness and women, had a presentation about 10 years ago in Holland. And so I think that the title of the presentation was, "I'm not gifted, I'm just busy." But also in her presentation was the rhetorical question, who ever heard of a gifted mom? And she in that article, she shows how over centuries, all kinds of philosophers, academics have shown that women obviously cannot be gifted because they are, well, not built that way, obviously, as everyone, every male probably, and some females too, will be able to see. In fact, it's Letha Hollingworth, about a century ago, who first started to substantially investigate it, but it's still, of course, given, it's also a masculine feminine thing. And so giftedness, when you typically think it's a feminine quality to be more empathic, which statistically shows too, obviously it's not result oriented, so it probably will not be gifted in that classical definition. But I would think of gifted relations, people who show moral leadership, show stewardship towards the earth, are community builders, obviously care for relations. And when I read on Facebook, on the InterGifted Facebook page about loneliness, it's sure often the empathetic kind who has found out that it's difficult to be as intensely loved by other people, feel intense relations with other people as they would like to feel themselves. It simply doesn't seem to come back to them in equal portions. So when I would think of gifted relation, it's about their uncommon, complex, intense and driven way to think about relations and to think about context instead of focus, and the other difference between empathy and task orientation. And just as a side thought too, in the book of Pichowski, Mellow Out, he specifically mentions that Dabrowski's emotional overexcitability, or extra receptivity, I would like to call it, refers both to the emotional sensitivity, say the HSP kind, but also to uncommon high empathic concern, which he has noted and which fortunately has become more accepted as a typical quality over the last years. I think many things have changed there. But, you know, it's funny, I already said that, when you think of gifted relations compared to gifted results, someone making beautiful music maybe is more in the gifted relations. And if he wins a prize, he's suddenly gifted because of the results. But if you cherish the beautiful music that moves and obviously makes a connection when you listen to it, I think you hear a gifted relation coming to you. Yes. Okay, now we come to the IRI, the Interpersonal Reactivity Index. I hope you all have received this questionnaire already. Jen asked. To my opinion, it is simple. It's 35 years old now, but it's still widely used, and I think it's remarkable how 4 times 7 questions give quite a practical insight for yourself, both in the different aspects of interpersonal reactions, relations, as in your own score.
I'm just interrupting you very, very briefly to say we're at about 40 minutes. Your timekeeper is telling you we're at about 40 minutes.
Oh, well.
So we're good, but just so you have it in mind.
Yes, okay. I think when you look at the, when you probably also have looked at these 4 scales, the big differences between perspective taking and empathic concern, that it's an entirely different situation, an entirely different kind of identification. And so you can have a high score on perspective taking and low on empathic concern, and vice versa. Also, I should mention there are different opinions in different books on empathy, and some people connect it to psychicness as well. In my opinion, I think that depends on the modality of psychicness. Some people are clear hearing, clear seeing, or clear knowing, and I think you would score different in the scale. A note for people who have a high score on personal distress: don't enroll in first aid courses. I wonder how these scores were with you. I think the important thing is that you're aware that when you enter them, you have a subjective score, that the position is relative to that average. The lines are one standard deviation. So it can easily happen that you score higher or lower than the dotted lines. Please assess yourself wisely and don't let yourself get carried away by fatal ideas about your score. Additionally, too, that every style has its own qualities and advantages. At this moment, I would like to have another intermission short, whether perhaps someone wants to comment on this IRI or have questions of his own score that should be addressed now. Are there any ones, or shall I continue?
I had a quick question. Maybe I was overthinking it a little bit, but I had trouble answering the questions in the personal distress scale, because for me it makes so those were questions along the lines of how I handle emergencies. And for me, it makes a huge difference if I am able to do something in that emergency or not. And I noticed, for example, in I think question 27, mostly, my score varies greatly. If I'm in an emergency and I can't do anything but see it unfold, yes, I fall to pieces. But if it's an emergency that I can actually do something in, not so much at all. And I noticed that as soon as I started color coding and see which one fit in the personal distress scale, that many of them were a little bit open to interpretation when it comes to that. So I'm really curious what you think about that.
I think when you are able to do something about it, empathic concern kicks in. Because, well, it's the charitable Samaritan in the Bible. The important thing is that you have, in empathic concern, you are very well aware of the distinction between yourself and the other person, so you can help.
Yes.
And the natural stance when you have high personal distress is, when you see it, you just want to run away, because it's personally threatening.
Yeah. Okay.
When you have psychic abilities, it's often difficult, or well, you have to learn it anyway, because otherwise the quality will kill you. But you have to be aware of separating between the energy of the other person and your own energy. And I'll come to that now. When in the child relations, when you have a tendency to really want to make contact with other people, whatever happens, you may be liable to score higher on personal distress, because when you somehow feel you're not in connection, you're doing everything to get there, and that may come out rather unpleasant. I see you nodding, so almost seems I answered your question. Okay, then I'll continue to the excess part. I already mentioned the extra. What happens if it becomes more, if something good becomes too much of something good? And when you, basically the characteristics are the same, but it gets, and I visualize it in a way by moving my hands to that laser sharp focus. The task is the only thing that counts suddenly. Relations, people are totally irrelevant. Somehow, often people lose overview of what they are doing. They can be very abusive, abrasive. They suddenly start insulting the people that they are working with. They start to get very rigid in their structures. Basically, they are so stiff, scared that they will not reach their task, that they get completely in overload situation. And you might compare it to a block wave. So suddenly, from out of nowhere, well, sometimes you see emotions rising. Out of nowhere, they start screaming. And funny thing is, when they have blown their top, they just out of nowhere stop screaming and say, well, let's go on, shall we? Very funny. And some people can, what I would call, situationally behave like Asperger's in that respect. I think that's also part of my conviction of idea that it's a continuum, and that extreme task-orientedness is verging on autism-like qualities. So people, when they get situationally excessive, they look like Asperger's, but when at rest, at ease, they are just people who are very devout workers and are very able to reach their targets. The empath is moving in the other directions, as I showed with my hands widening. The radar is working in extra hours. There's no place for own needs, no place for own initiatives. They are so curious, they're so anxious not to miss any input from their environment that would jeopardize the relation, that they completely lose themselves. They, as they are with their attention totally not with themselves, they have plummeting self-esteem. They lose themselves, and well, it can look like something like codependency. They are completely dependent of other people, of the task-oriented people, because often the situation gets, say, vice versa. Of course, the fascinating thing with empathy and task orientations is that when you have two people together, opposites attract. It's an old law. So when you have a couple of people, like living in the same house, technically one will always be more empathic than the other, because it's in a way unlikely that they will be similar. So there's a difference, and that influences the relation. And then comes sometimes the child. The child, where's the child? Here's the child. I've written it down. So you have basically two possibilities when you have it crossed in a way. Of course, probably one parent is more empathic than the other, but consider it's a simplification. An empathic parent and a task-oriented child. The parent complains, my child is not aware of my boundaries and just prods on without informing me. The child says, parent is always unclear about what I should do and seldomly praises my actual accomplishments. So why should I bother informing him, her? I just concentrate on what I'm doing because it doesn't get the non-verbal hints from the parent, and the parent is not aware that the child doesn't get the hints. So they're unhappy, which can be very unhappy with each other. And I think in the long run, it may lead for the child to bad memories about considerate cooperation. So when someone in their surroundings starts to talk about relations, while actually the adult at that time thinks time for doing something, he or she may get into extra task orientation to prove the point that it's time to work now. The other way around, a task-oriented parent and empathic child, the parent says, you know, it's a nice child, but, well, basically it lacks discipline. It's easily distracted, it doesn't persist, should show more initiative, more discipline, and then something good will finally possibly come out of it. But it's a bit a worry child. The child, on the other hand, tries to feel loved and secure because it's about relations for the child, and says, you know, I do my best to figure out what the parent would like me to do. I try to follow his leads, her leads. But whatever I do, I never get the feeling that I'm truly seen, loved, and respected. Well, of course, he or she may say that was a good job, but I don't feel anything. So they just say it, it's not true. But I'll keep trying to do better the next time. That may lead as an adult or as a child already to the conviction that love is conditional and that you can only earn it by doing your stinking best and by attending very carefully to what you think other people are expecting of you. That may lead to perfectionism, that may lead to lack of initiative, and to the things that are mentioned in the extra empathy quote. So being unsure, always having the conviction that love is not unconditional and something life is giving you. You have to work very hard for it. And in that similar vein, again, a simplification, it's really, in a way, funny how you might say it's like enacting in a play, but you might also say it's, in a way, it's very, it's confusion on both sides. An empathic person, an extra empathic person, looks for a task-oriented partner because he or she wants to care for someone and hopes to get heartfelt love in return. And thinks, why do we have this relation together? Because we want to, it's natural for us to increase our feelings of mutual connection. And if I join in my partner's initiatives, I'm sure he or she will appreciate it. And well, I'm sure I can always find something to help him or her with. On the other hand, the other half of the partnership, the task-oriented person, looks for an empathic partner because it's nice to be taken care of when you are busy doing your tasks. It's nice to have someone to join you in these tasks, and so you can be happy together when the task is finished, successfully, of course. So they think a relation is about joint interest to do things and have a joint drive to accomplish things. And they are basically willing to take the lead because they can always think of a task. Sorry, I think this, of course, these are simplifications, but in a way you can always, in a way you can say, well, isn't that beautiful fitting together? Or you can say, isn't it continuous confusion about the other's motives? But I think many people are happily together living in this stance, because I do think there's no right or wrong, there's no better or worse in empathy versus task orientation. And there are so many instances of cooperations between an empathic and a task-oriented person. Of course, it's better to get out of or stay out of the excess behavior, and it's important for the task-oriented person to be aware when he feels his or her emotions rising and near to the point blowing the top, that it's important to ask around, do I miss something? Maybe is something wrong? Instead of just focusing and going on. And the empath should be aware to ask the task-oriented person whether he or she will stop doing something, be aware that the non-verbal signals will not be picked up. So you should overcome your shame and say it, what hinders or bothers you. In a way, to wrap up the entire intention of the talk, I think it's so important to be aware of that you have extra versions of qualities that everybody else may have, but your version is extra and it may become a theme for you. And if you're aware that you are doing things extra fashion, it will help you to bring and keep them in an effective and sustainable mode for expression. And that people are, when they're saying, you're so demanding, you just can say, yes, I know, I have an intense focus on my activity. And that brings me very nice things. And when they're saying, you're always so sensitive, you say, I have this excellent antennae for emotional undercurrents in organizations. So I know I'm the first to know that in a month, a riot will break out. And so we can do something about it. Blame may show the lead for fame. Well, I think this more information on the subject you can find on my website and in my book. And yes, I think this is then concludes my presentation, and I welcome your comments back. Yes, in screen.
Thank you so much, Willem. This is super interesting. So I'm curious to hear questions. I have a question from somebody, but I'm going to ask it a little bit after. If anybody has questions about the IRI and about the empathy versus task orientation specifically, that would be great right now. And then I have a more general question from somebody after. So anybody? If nobody has a question, I have one about this. Here, yeah, we have one coming. How would an empath, hold on one second. Would an empath correspond to a feeler in the Myers-Briggs, and a task-oriented would correspond more to a T in the Myers-Briggs thinker?
Tend to think that you may find that often, though not always, I lately, actually this last weekend, I realized that probably when you put objectivity against subjectivity, the Fs will almost certainly favor subjectivity and feel attracted by extra intelligence and the approach, while the thinkers will more favor objectivity and hard data. So there is, in a way, this watershed. You have the T's and the F's. Yes, people who favor, like the thinking, favor hard data, often actions, concrete things. It's a bit mixed with the S and N too, I'm aware, but obviously the F is about feelings, values, and that's what empaths often have. But don't, well, and I think I should add an important thing. Due to their complexity, I found in my practice over the years that often XIPs connect strongly to more than one type in MBTI. And it's, although in theory this should not be possible, I think it's very practical to consider that it is true. And often you may find that XIPs, and especially gifted people who consider themselves gifted and use the word, have always something with NT, intuiting and thinking, but maybe in their S mode, in their doing mode, especially when they're kinesthetic learners, maybe a feeler and very aware of their senses. So, and are they then empathetic or task-oriented? That depends on what they are doing.
Interesting. Yeah. Another question coming in, and it's funny because somebody asks and then somebody says, I had a similar thought, great question. And I had a similar thought as well. So this is going to be my question. So thank you. The question is it likely that you can be extra task-oriented at certain fields such as of life, such as career life, while being extra empathic at other fields, such as personal relations? She resonates a lot with the XT while doing research at work, but in interpersonal relations probably flips into XE.
Well, sometimes the confusion is that drivenness is somehow connected to results, while you can also be very driven in your relations. So when you're studying, doing your work, your research work, you might consider that you're thinking, but the moment shit breaks out on the university where you work, what is your natural reaction? Don't disturb me, or are you administering bandages immediately? So that's one. And the other point is, as I said, that often you may feel like you are an NT and even an NTJ in your abstract thinking and intellectual or academic work, and find that you connect more with an SFP when you're working with your hands at home. So I found, to my surprise, I found all kinds of combination. And so, but specifically about XT at work, career life, of course, it's a challenging thought if you're somehow leaving out an important part of your personality at work and basically are dying as a human being while studying academic proficient things. But that's a bit, it's a leading question, and it may certainly not be the case. So everything is flexible with XIPs, and it's when you think of the concept of complexity and how they are built, and when I'm thinking lately about that intensity is in a way a multinodality of your nerves, that your senses are always active. There's an article about brains on fire, that when you're doing something, all parts of your brain light up because you have connections through all your senses at the same time. XIPs can be many persons in one. And well, that of course allows for the liberty to choose the one that favors you the best at that time. If you are aware that there are separate personalities and you are aware of the advantages that these different personalities bring in different situations, which I encourage. You're welcome for answering. Yes. Any more questions?
Okay, if no one has more questions on this topic at the moment, another question from before, which relates more to your general concept of extra intelligence, is how could you convince somebody that they are gifted if they weren't identified in school, and so now they don't believe that they're gifted? So one of our participants was talking about his wife who teaches, hold on, I've got to make sure that I'm representing the question well. She teaches highly gifted students, but she doesn't see it as something she's part of. She just sees it as they're gifted and I'm not, but she actually is, in his opinion, she actually is quite gifted as well. So how could she be convinced that she is gifted?
Yeah, well, actually, I will be presenting at the Summer Seng Conference in Williamsburg in 2 months, with as subject acknowledging one's intensity is very helpful for care persons and for education persons in relating to the persons in their care. It's funny how I remember even at Annelien was at Roper Institute, well, you might, and asked there, it's already a couple of years ago, is the staff gifted? And it led to sincere embarrassment. While obviously the person they were talking to was gifted all over her face, body, whatever you might call it. So basically, of course, I often get these questions. People enter my practice and often they are very stressed because they think they will be kicked out after 10 minutes after I found out that they're not gifted at all. But, well, the moment you are worrying about the question, that's a funny indication, because non-gifted people don't worry about their giftedness. They just change the subject because it's entirely not interesting. So I ask, and I ask people about their about their fears, about, of course, it's something connected to imposter syndrome, things like that. But basically, and Annelien has had these courses too, you ask people to write down why they cannot be gifted. And usually when they write it down and they read it, they somehow think, okay, that's funny. So it's often there are, of course, these traumatic experiences of teachers who have humiliated children, parents who say, you know, teacher think you're okay, but I don't think you're really an Einstein, so don't bother. all these kinds of things have happened in people's lives, which prevents them from acknowledging this gift. And at some time, well, it's time to get rid of that old pain. But basically, when you can't stop asking yourself the question, that is a very cardinal marker. And it's funny too, I think, because, well, and it's happening. People phone me and said, okay, I've had your article now in my drawer for 2 years and I changed jobs twice, so maybe I should do something about that. And there's much to enjoy when you look at it at some point. I think I read this about the Seng presentation, would it be viewable later? I think Seng has their own privilege of making recordings. At least I have to sign that I will allow them and use them for their own good. I have been wondering today, actually this afternoon, I thought, okay, well, maybe it might be an idea. I have that Seng presentation after summer. I can present it here, time and Jen allowing. But so then it will be recorded, but in a different fashion, as I will be presenting it here and not at Seng. But I don't know what Seng will do this year. So, and thank you for your thanks about the book, Kitty. Where's Kitty? I don't know. Kitty has no. Oh, okay. Thank you, Kitty. Coming more.
Any other questions, anyone? We are close to time. So if no one else has other questions, I'll make a few more final comments and then we'll close.
Oh yes, and I can, as an how say that, as an afterthought, I added for the InterGifted, the announcement of the presentation, I had this labyrinth picture detail. So I just love to show you the entire labyrinth, you and me labyrinth, so people can enter it walking on the thing that the sand that I raked with the rake are marked. And the fascinating thing is that you can see it in a way as a dance of daily life too, because two people enter the labyrinth, and I've seen it that empathetic people tend to walk their half. You can see on my website under the labyrinth tab more about these labyrinths. They walk their half. The empaths are always looking at the person who is looking the other half. Well, task-oriented people just are busy with getting their own path and walking to the end. And of course they meet in the center. But it has struck me over time that I made these labyrinths and worked with it, that it's so typical that you can see the actual behavior you can see in the labyrinth. And of course, I'm also liking this picture very much, so I thought I end with it. Yes.
I like that. Thank you. So thank you, Willem. This has been a really, really interesting presentation. I think there are a few things that, that will stick with me particularly. I love this idea of the ping, sending the ping out, and the idea of the guardians of the label gifted. And I think it probably gives a lot of the people, a lot of our members in InterGifted and people who will discover InterGifted, I want to say hope, because a lot of people do struggle with, feeling like they don't fit into the gifted category as it's presented just through the vision of IQ, or as you say, from outside in. So this was particularly interesting to me, but lots of other things have come to my mind, and now this is going to be, I'm sure for all of us, this is going to be kind of accompanying our thoughts and our reflections for the next few weeks at least, if not more, and really guiding our own journey, as you say, of learning more about ourselves and how we experience the world. What is it like to be us, as you ask, right? So thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for attending. We have lots of new faces, so that's fun. It's nice to meet some of you that I've seen on Facebook and see your faces and learn a little bit more about you. If you're all interested in working with Willem in coaching, then you're welcome to send us an email at coaching@intergifted.com. That's true for whoever's here today and whoever's watching the recording afterward. And you can learn more about his website on zymenchen.com, learn more about his work on his website. And then I wanted to say, stay tuned for the next Coaching Network talk, which is going to be great. It's going to be with Paula Prober, who, if you don't know her, she's a great voice in the field of giftedness. She's got also a very balanced approach, which I love. And she's publishing her book next month. So we're going to have her talking about her book and have an open discussion with her, so anybody can ask her questions about it, and she'll be telling us a little bit more about that. So I'm very excited about that. Should be in July, so more details coming soon. And then we'll have a handout, as Willem mentioned, we'll have a handout available on the website afterward, along with the recording, and you'll see all this showing up on the Facebook and in the newsletter. So if anybody has any follow-up thoughts or whatever, feel free to contact Willem or me or whatever. We're here for you all. So thanks for being here, everybody. Thanks, Willem.
Yes, it's been my pleasure and my wonderful new experience. Thanking you for attending that.
You did a great job, by the way, in this new format, like an all-pro. Okay, thanks, everybody. I'll close now. Bye.
Bye.